Hey everybody, welcome to our virtual Wednesday night Bible study. This is for January the 6th. Happy New Year. Glad to see you. We said last week, I won't see you again until next year. And true to our word, here we are. Good to see you tonight. Hey, can I get you to do a couple of things as we enter into our study this evening? First of all, if you're watching on YouTube, below the video, you're going to see probably a thumbs up and a thumbs down. There may even be a share button where you could send the link via email, text, something like that. Would you hit the thumbs up button for us and let us know that you are here? We get a digital counter, but one of the best ways we know that people have interacted with the video is to get a thumbs up from you. And there's a red, looks like a kind of a rectangular tab underneath the video that says subscribe. It's free of charge. If you'll hit the subscribe button, what that will do is it will send notifications to your email address and to your YouTube subscription every time we have a new video up on YouTube. And I have said it before, our page is not monetized. It's not like we're making money off of our videos, but we do gain some editing features and publishing features when you click the subscribe buttons. The more subscribers we have, the better off we are at updating our videos and publishing and such. Now, the second thing is if you're on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, and you might be a little more familiar with the Facebook format because just about everybody has Facebook, give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you are with us. Give us a thumbs up and then share the video. Take and share the video, and that means it appears on your timeline, meaning your friends, your family, everybody connected to you on Facebook also has access to the video, which means, let's just say that 100 people share the video and 4 of your friends watch it. Well, that's 400 people who've watched the video, and maybe they'll share it too. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the truth of God, the Bible, could have so many shares that every week, not just us, but any faithful congregation publishing videos and putting videos out, if we had millions and millions and millions of shares, wouldn't that be great? It can go all over the world that way, and that's our desire. We're supposed to take the gospel to the whole world, and while we do publish these videos, one for our members who may be quarantined at home for different reasons, it's also great that we can reach lots of folks in lots of different places of the world just with a click of a button, sharing a video. Do that, if you will, for us tonight. Now, last week we ended a study. In fact, we were supposed to be, last week in a new study, we're going to do like an interim study, and then this week we would have a new class starting. But we had some questions come up about demons, and so we spent some time studying demons and taking a look at a few questions that needed answer. But we're starting a new study tonight, and I have been asking for input for a while. And I want you to know that I've gotten a lot of input on classes. We've gotten a lot of feedback. So I'm not going to spend a long time on the next subject matter. We did a sermon series about the Lord's return in judgment. So I'm not going to spend a long time on this series, but we had a couple of people ask for a study on what happens when you die. I think that's a great study, and I do want to honor that request. I just think it's timely. I think a lot of people are curious about that right now with everything going on. So we're going to study that for a couple of weeks. We're probably going to take 5-6 weeks, take a look at it, at least through the month of January. Probably have a week or two in February, and we'll see. Maybe some of our lessons extend several weeks, and we end up 8 or 9 or 10 weeks or something like that. But I do want to take a look at that. I want to take a look at heaven and hell. I've had a lot of questions in the last little while about Hades. What's Hades like? Explain the difference between paradise and the side of torments, Tartarus. Explain that. So we're gonna take a look at that, and then we had a couple of requests for study of the existence of God, and I think that kind of goes right along with what we were talking about the angels and demons, the unseen world, and maybe now with a lot of stuff that's happening Culturally, it might be really good to confirm belief in the one God who exists and who is and always will exist and who's in charge. He's sovereign. So I want to take a look. It's not a study of the Godhead, which we did back over the summer. If you were with us, you remember we studied the Godhead. So it's not a study of the Godhead, but I do want to, after this, I want to get into a study of the existence of God. How can you prove in our culture to your friends and family members who may not believe in God, or how do you explain to your kids God is real? Here's how we know that God is real. So I want to get through this little study of what happens when we die. Excuse me. I want to get through that, and then we want to study the existence of God. And we've had there's been more requests this time for material, so I'm going to try to honor all of those requests at some point. And our Bible classes are coming back pretty soon here at North Hamilton. The elders are logistically figuring out a way to do that, but we've got to do it. We can't not be together studying all the time. So we're doing our best. So that means we're going to be adding a class, and I'll do my very best to make that material available online too. And so we'll probably be looking at something textual when we come back, a book of the Bible, because we've had several requests for books of the Bible. I think that'd be wonderful to do, and it's a great thing. But we can also study topically, and that's what we want to do beginning tonight. I'm also going to start publishing, hopefully try to figure out a way to publish some notes. I've upgraded some of my computer equipment. I think I'm now in the year 2021. My computer, my laptop, and things I've got access to now weren't forged out of stone like some of my computer equipment. I'm still learning some of my equipment, but I think my input and processing speeds are a little bit faster now. And I'm hoping I can do some playing around with camera work. I hope that's going to be helpful as well. So let's talk about what happens when we die, because it's a terrific subject. It's really important right now, especially with everything that we're experiencing. There's a lot of fear and unrest. There's a lot of uncertainty about our future. And I believe that the question was certainly warranted. Now, here's where we're going to start. I'm just going to introduce it tonight, and then I want to try to publish some study notes, some material for you to take a look at next week's lesson. We're going to delve into the subject that I'm going to introduce tonight just a little bit more, and that is the issue of the soul. And the reason I want to start here, I'm not just going to immediately jump into a study of heaven, and I'm not going to immediately jump into a study of hell or even Hades, because there has to be an understanding of the body and the soul and the spirit and the relationship and whatever disconnections exist between them at death. We have to understand that before we get to hell and heaven and what eternity is like and how can we have confidence in eternal life and things of that sort. Got to understand the soul. And I think largely that's, I don't know, we mentioned the soul, but I think largely it's been, as a study, neglected some. And I think there's maybe reasons for that. It's easy to become very materialistic. It's very easy to have a worldly outlook on life. I think for the most part, more people worry about their bodies and things physical than they do their souls. I'm really convinced of that. This year, I think, has been evidence of that. Now, I want you to don't run away from this video and say, David doesn't believe in coronavirus. I certainly do, and don't say, David doesn't think it's real, because I certainly think it's real. And don't dare walk out and misrepresent me and say, David doesn't believe it's deadly for some people, because I do believe that it is for some people. It's certainly a serious situation. And I think, do the research, and you can tell that a lot of people fit a category where they have some comorbidities, and they're excessively deficient in vitamin D3, and there's certain prerequisites that if you fit those prerequisites, it could hit you pretty hard, and it has hit some people pretty hard. Okay? The vast majority of people, you're going to have like a flu, you're going to have something going on, but look at the way that we have reacted to this virus. Okay? And you don't go out and say that I don't take it seriously, because we certainly do. We take all the precautions that we need to take. But I think the way that we have reacted has shown that we care a lot more in our culture. Okay? We care a lot more in our culture for our body and for our wealth than we do the soul. And I think it's largely because we misunderstand what the soul is. And if you understand the soul, and if I understand it, right, if we get that part down and we nail that down, we say, I've got a crystal clear understanding from the Bible what God says about the soul, then it provides a much greater balance to the physical and the spiritual. And while you certainly don't neglect physical things, and you don't neglect material things because it's important, there's a stewardship involved in that, you don't do it to the exclusion of the spiritual. And I think this year we've seen some people do that, where the physical has been emphasized to the exclusion of the spiritual. And either they've tossed aside their concern for the soul, which I'm not sure has happened, or maybe they misunderstand the soul. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know, but this has to be evaluated on an individual basis. We're going to talk about judgment. The Lord handles that issue, and I'm so thankful for that. But I want to get into the soul for just a little bit tonight, just to introduce it and to suggest that if you really want to understand heaven, hell, you want to understand judgment, you want to take a look at, and one of the things we're going to talk about is the resurrection from the grave. Okay? That's always had a lot of questions attached to it. I don't understand everything about it, but I know the body is going to be raised on the last day. Your physical body, mine, and it's going to be changed, and it will become immortal, and that immortal shell is now going to house our immortal soul. Okay, so there's a lot of things we're going to talk about when somebody says, well, what happens at death? What happens when we die? There's a lot involved in that, but you can't understand any of it unless you get the first part down, which is there's a part of you, and we're going to explore this in great detail next week. There's a part of you and me that from the moment it comes into existence, it never ceases to exist. You and I are going to live forever somewhere someday. That's absolutely the truth. And the Bible is very, very clear. It's unmistakable. It's unambiguous when it says you have a soul. Okay, so I just want to look at a couple of those verses with you tonight. I have my Bible open to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes 12. I'll give you a minute to turn to Ecclesiastes 12. Ecclesiastes 12. If you've read this passage before, it's one of my favorites in the Bible. I love Ecclesiastes 12. Such a powerful chapter. It's an interesting, especially the first 8 verses or so, because it's like he's moving from youth, and he moves all the way up to old age, which leads us to understand verse 6 and verse 7 to be a reference to death. Now, if you start in verse 1, here he says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. And that is set in contrast to the difficult days and the years draw near when you say I have no pleasure in them. So he's got a contrast between harder days, older age, and younger days, youth, when there's not as much trouble. Some youth have trouble, but it isn't typical, right? When you're young and carefree, your body's usually strong, your senses are sharp. It's not always that way. Okay, so he starts in verse 2, and without getting bogged down too much, with all the language and such in the verses that follow, I think he's describing the aging process, old age, when he says, while the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened. That would have a reference to how your vision is not nearly as good in your older years as it was when you were young. Some people are an exception to that, I've always marveled, my dad, he needs glasses now when he reads. He didn't always have to have that, but even still, he is an eagle eye. I mean, he can spot things a mile away and tell you what a sign says a mile down the road. That's amazing to me. All right, but I understand not everybody's that way. When you get older, your eyesight dims a little bit. He said, the clouds do not return in the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble, strong men bow down. The grinders, your teeth, they cease because they're few. You lose teeth, when you get older, rot and other reasons. And those that look through the windows grow dim. When the doors are shut in the streets, the sound, notice the sound now. The sound is growing low of the grinding. When one rises up, the sound of a bird. All the daughters of music are brought low. You can't hear the music and the festive sounds anymore. It's just all of this is descriptive of old age, right? So he's talking about how we get older, and these are difficult times when we grow older. Okay, so we're transitioning from youth to old age, and then naturally death comes after that. So verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was. That's your body. That's my body. See, the body goes back to dust, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. So the Bible is acknowledging that there's a part of you that doesn't die, and there's a part of me that doesn't die. That's the soul. Okay, so if we want to understand what happens when we die, this is the beginning point. Got to understand the soul. What is the soul? What is that part of you, inside of you, that even though the body goes back to the dust of the earth, and it does after a certain amount of time, which we'll cover when we get into resurrection from the grave, because that's part of what happens when we die. There's a resurrection of that body. But the soul doesn't go down into the grave. It stays alive. It goes somewhere. That gets us into Hades, paradise, Tartarus, things of that sort. But the Bible acknowledges the existence of the soul. James 2, verse 26. This is kind of like a New Testament parallel in some way to the truth presented in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. So let's turn to the book of James. And would you go with me to James chapter 2? We're going to look at the last verse in James chapter 2. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Now there's a comparison here, right? He's making a comparison to show us that if you just merely believe, but you don't have action behind it, if you don't have obedience to couple with what you know to be true, it's dead. And then the illustration is the body without the spirit is dead. So when the spirit withdraws from the body, when the spirit and the body are separated, that body's lifeless. It is dead, right? It's not like it's just motionless. I mean, there's nothing left in that body. It's empty. And faith without works is just as empty. It's pointless. It's useless. So if you just mentally assent to something, I acknowledge that Jesus is the Son of God, but you don't do what he says to do. You're not following his word. I'm not listening and obeying what he says. It's vain. Just as vain as a body without the spirit. But notice, there's a spirit inside of you and me. So James 2:26. And that gets us into, Luke 16:19 through 31. That's one of the passages we're going to look at in the coming weeks. What is the great gulf fixed? What in the world is that? And why can't people come back from there? We're going to talk about that. We talked about it a little bit in the Angels and Demons series the last couple of weeks. But that story in Luke 16 proves that man is more than just the physical part. Okay, so care for your body. Be a good steward of your body. Take care of it. Make the best decisions you can because your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. Bible says that. But you've got a soul inside you that needs taken care of too. And you cannot neglect your soul and expect that it's going to be okay once it separates from the body. There's two considerations there. Okay? So there's a part of man that lives beyond the death of the body. And that part is going to live forever. Now, the physical body is going to be changed one day into an immortal shell. But it's the soul that you've got to take care of. That's the responsible, moral part of you. Matthew 10, verse 28. Jesus offers a warning. Matthew 10, verse 28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather, in verse 28, Fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. So be afraid of a negative consequence to the soul. And then I think of Matthew 22, verses 36 through 37, that we're to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Okay, so the Bible undeniably affirms the existence of our soul. That is the beginning point for understanding what happens when we die. What happens when we die? Good question. Had several people ask it. Well, you've got a soul. Okay, and I promise next week we're going to delve in deep, dig deep into the subject of the soul to try to figure that out. We're going to establish next week that your soul, my soul, is the seat of your thinking and emotion. And to understand our emotions and reactions and why we think the way that we do, you've got to understand the soul. It's all connected together. I put down in my notes 2 Peter chapter 2, and that's a chapter largely dealing with false teachers, how to handle people who don't teach truth. 2 Peter 2, verse 8, he talks about Lot. He says, "For that righteous man dwelling among them, tormenting his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds." Something deep inside him, not physically, but deep inside, was stirred and affected by the lawlessness of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's talking about Lot, by the way, back in verse 7, righteous Lot. And then if we stay in the New Testament, if we were to go up to 3 John, it's so important. I love this verse. John says, "Beloved," verse 2, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health." I don't want you to struggle with money, and I want your health to be good. And maybe putting in a context, I don't want you to have coronavirus. I don't want anybody to have that. I don't want you to have the flu. I don't want you to get cancer. I don't want you to have heart disease. I want you to be healthy. And I want you to prosper. I don't want you to lose your job. I don't want you to struggle to put food on the table for your family. I don't want you to struggle to pay your rent. I don't want that for you. I want you to be prosperous. I want your health to be good. And then he says, just as your soul prospers. In other words, your soul and the health and the condition of your soul becomes the barometer for how you're doing health-wise and money-wise. I mean, what does it matter if you have a lot of money and you're making a ton of money and you're really healthy and you're physically strong if your soul is perishing? Okay? Because it's not going to help us when the body dies, right? Because the soul is the thing that lives on and on. So the Bible is very clear that you got to take care of the soul, and it's accountable to God. The soul is accountable. Hebrews 13, verse 17, it speaks of elders, that we're to obey and submit to whatever conditions they provide. Scriptural conditions, of course, when they're doing things in the best, they're shepherds. They feed sheep. And when sheep are rebellious or they refuse to eat, you don't cause joy to the eldership. And he says you don't cause grief to elders because they have to give an account for your soul. They're the ones that stand in judgment and give an account for that. Hebrews 13, 17. Luke 2 and verse 20. That's in the parable of the rich man that tore his barns down and built greater, and God said, "You're a fool. This night your soul will be required of you." So our soul is accountable to God, and it needs to be saved. What if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul? Matthew 16, 26. Your soul is going to stand in judgment one day. So that's where we're going to go. For the next couple of weeks, we've been asked specifically by several people, would we please talk about what happens when we die? And that we shall do. So stay tuned. Next week, we're going to start with the soul because we have to understand what it is, what goes beyond the grave, what part of us lives beyond the grave. And once we start understanding that, it may heighten our sense of responsibility to that soul. There's stewardship for the body, but there's also to the soul, and it's even greater for the soul because the body's just the body. Without the spirit, it's dead, James 2:26. So we'll take a look at that. What do you think happens? What do you think happens when we die? Let me know. Love to hear back from you. Love to hear from you. Call me. Shoot me an email. Send, make a note. Observe. We're also, we're going to observe that there's some things that aren't true that people suggest happen that don't actually happen. The Bible does not teach things like a It doesn't teach a rapture, and it doesn't teach a millennial reign of Christ in the city of Jerusalem. It doesn't teach those things. The Bible's very clear what happens when we die. So we're taking a look at that. Thank you so much. I hope you had a great Christmas, and I hope you had a great New Year's. I hope you find peace with God. I hope you put your trust there. You can't trust the world of men. Things are crazy right now in the world. We'll see. But I know this. Take care of your soul. It's going to be okay. Hey, I love you guys. I'll see you next week and look forward to that new installment, the new lesson on what happens when we die, part 2, which will be a reference to the soul. See you next week.